actually read more books this year than I thought I had. Just wanted to make a bit of a recap, a video of what I read this year, as well as some of the thoughts on some of the books that I read in physical format as well as Kindle. I got surprised with how many books I read. It's difficult to keep up the habit sometimes, given that some books that I read this year, and we'll go in order, but like something like The Idiot by Dostoevsky, I actually read it on Kindle, and it wasn't until after I had completed it that I decided to buy a physical copy. This physical copy put in perspective how much I had read on the Kindle, because when you're carrying the Kindle, it doesn't make that much of a difference. It doesn't feel like you're putting in work. It actually took me probably close to 4 months to finish this book. This was before me hearing about book stacking and reading multiple things at once, at least two stories at once, so you can alternate and not get so fatigued. Um, that was before that, so that's why it took me so long. There was a period where I kind of just had stopped and I wanted to keep reading it, but it was going through a slump uh, period between the first, I believe is the first act, and the second act. Yeah, between part two and part three, when they're in they're not in St. Petersburg anymore. They're in the small vacation town. The beginning of that felt really slow to me, and it was probably because of me. It's nothing with the book itself, but I found it kind of difficult to get out of that slump for this book specifically. Although towards the end of part three and part four, I finished it in probably week and a half, 2 weeks, which is pretty fast for the pace that I usually read books like novels that are this dense. I would have benefited from maybe switching or reading something lighter compared to this, something that's narratively lighter at the same time that I'm reading this. But I would recommend it. I would recommend it. Another book that I read was A History of the World Through Six Classes. So I think I actually got this one and this one at the same time. I'll go through this one next. Um, it recounts the human history through six major drinks that have shaped us as a society and societies throughout history. Those being in chronological order: beer, then we have wine, spirits being liquor, coffee, tea, and Coca-Cola or soda. Coca-Cola for just to it represents soda and carbonated drinks. And so it goes through world history and the impact that these drinks had, and the historical context in which they were, like the methodology in which they were developed by the societies that adopted them first, and the role that they played in the historical context uh, that they became popular in. The most interesting sections of this book were the very first section about beer and how uh, early societies, like I believe it was, beer in Mesopotamia and Egypt. This section was very nice to read on, and actually how the process of brewed drinks was sort of a religious ceremonial practice, and how it became adopted by other the process of brewing and fermentation. It goes from there, it goes on to wine, and then it goes on to the rest of the drinks. I enjoyed that section the most, and I think the section on tea was the most enlightening for me. Um, with it goes over the economy of tea, the impact of the British obsession for tea, and then you bring in India and China, and it goes into the whole historical ramifications for that. This was a very good drink, very good book. I would recommend. Another book that I got was Civilized to Death. Civilized to Death by Christopher Ryan. Christopher Ryan, it introduces a few interesting ideas that I took some notes on, and I found very intriguing and definitely worth reading more on. The human adoption of agriculture and the agricultural revolution is an adaptation to climate change in that happened early on after the early Ice Age, and it's not an invention of human ingenuity. Uh, Basically, stating that humans did not choose to become sedentary and agricultural, and that what we usually often consider civilization and established societies is inherently better than what humans had previously as hunter gatherers, um, and it just go through the ramifications on the impact of the happiness of hunter gatherers compared to civilized humans. Hunter gatherers don't usually, or his states don't perceive work as a separate construct from everyday life, so they wouldn't have an idea of like, okay, we need to live to we worked in order to live, but rather there's no idea of work. You're just existing. It's part of your existence, and it's not removed. It's easy due to the comforts of everyday life for us to forget that we're still we're not separated from nature. We're in it. Nature is it's surrounding us, but it's easy for us to forget that. So this concept of work being separated from the rest of our lives is not present in hunter-gatherer societies because they're in. It's just part of their everyday routines. So there was a bit of similarities in those two ideas that I found interesting. 1984. This is a classic. I probably don't have much to say about it. It was the first time I read it. I had not read it before. You could probably read it in less than a month if you're really committed to it. I am going to reread it, especially because of the sections on Newspeak. That's the language that they're developing, that the party's developing to try to limit the capacity of thinking for the members of the party. Um, right, because if there's no word for certain prohibited um, terms or ideas in your language, how can you even become aware of those ideas, right? For me personally, that was the most uh, rewarding and engaging part of the book was the idea of language and how language shapes your thinking capacity. Um, and if you don't have a concept in your language, then how can you even become aware of it? Like if the concept doesn't exist, then that gets erased from existence in a way, because there's no way to put that concept out. Not a book, but rather a collection of short stories was Men Without Women by Ernest Hemingway. I actually got this little book at the Hemingway house. My two favorite ones on this uh, little compilation were definitely the first one, uh, which I was actually reading on the way back home, which was The Undefeated, and I actually wrote a small article trying to dissect uh, the ideas contained within the short story. It's about 40 or so pages. Even though, as I said, I don't have any knowledge at all about bullfighting, but the way that he tells the story, the way that he puts you in the skin of the Undefeated, which was this like kind of um, bullfighter that had seen better days, and he's just trying to get by now, scraping by, trying to get some time on the arena, just to make ends meet, and he's not in his golden era anymore. Called Manuel. The short story spans the duration of him being coming into the office and trying to find some work as a bullfighter, uh, through his like near death experience towards the end. There's a lot of symbology there on topics of your identity, and how people often attach their identities to their profession, reinventing yourself, as well as masculinity, and like many of Hemingway's stories. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This is actually something I really digged into, as you can see by the notes, little post-it notes in this book. Uh, this is a really nice edition. I would recommend you buy it if you see it at Barnes and Nobles. It's a soft cover, but it has selected speeches and essays and letters that Viktor Frankl wrote himself after the end of World War II. At the moment I started to read this book, I was interested in the question of suffering, of human suffering. Is suffering good? Is suffering neutral? Is suffering inherently bad? And all the philosophical takes around suffering. So this was a book that was actually kind of, came in clutch because, given the topic of his experience uh, in the concentration camps during World War II, it's and his memoir of it. This book is in a way a memoir. It's the first part is a memoir of his experiences, and the second part is his theory of logotherapy. He was a psychiatrist, so the second section of this book explains it better. Um, this is a really it's short, but it's dense, uh, and there's a lot of overlap with books. Like there's a lot of stoicism in this book, so this is something that would pair really well if you're reading something like, I think I have it here. If you're reading like Meditations, right, by Marcus Aurelius, um, or if you're reading the Enchiridion, um, Seneca's Letters. Like any book by Ryan Holiday. I guess some people would consider those self help, but I consider that he breaks down Stoicism pretty well in modern terms. This book would be also more of a modern application of Stoicism. There's a lot of philosophical overlap between this book and those Stoic ideas. Um, Although in the book, Viktor Frankl himself is approaching it from a psychiatric, neurological, more scientific side, right? I like this edition in particular because it has some illustrations about Viktor Frankl after he uh, after he's survived his World War II and being a prisoner. So that's that for all the hardcover books. Not that many actually that I read. This year I've leaned a lot into the portability of a Kindle. It makes it very convenient, and it helps me stick to the habit of reading compared to the hardcover, in my opinion. Although there's certainly an appeal for physical, whether it's a physical book, whether it's a hardcover or softcover book, a pocket book. Um, there's an appeal to it. I know there's an appeal to it, and then some people swear by it. Not everything should be read on a Kindle, in my opinion. There's certain topics and certain topics and certain styles, and by style I mean like just I guess it would be the prose of the writers, as well as the genre. I prefer to read nonfiction, books on science and anthropology, history on the Kindle, just because it's more manageable, and I can make notes and then export them out of the device onto my computer just to polish and do further research. I would leave physical books for memoirs or novels or something like more heavy, like The Idiot, or anything that's really uh, narrative dense and requires you to be present in the act of reading, right? So I've read so far this year on my Kindle Notes from the Underground, which I do believe I probably should have. It would have been better if I had read it on a physical copy of it. Given it's a short book. I've seen it. Like the physical copy, the actual physical book is really, like it's not a dense book such as this, uh, but it's dense, narratively dense, and then there's a lot to extract from it, philosophically, uh, and thematically. Another book that I read, and apparently this book is very popular, and I wasn't even aware of it, was White Knights. This was A very nice, short and sweet story. Uh, thematically, it thematically it doesn't feel that much like a Dostoevsky story. Although, and by a Dostoevsky story, I mean something like The Idiot, Notes from the Underground, Demons, Brothers Karamazov, something very dense, very tragic, psychologically complex. Uh, it was simpler. It was a simpler story. It was nice for a change. I would definitely recommend someone to read this in between Dostoevsky stories just to give themselves a break. You can still tell that it's him, but this is prior to his whole experience. I was being shot dead um, by a firing squad, so you can tell that he was writing this book at a different stage in his life. The death of Ivan Illich, this book was actually surprisingly good. It was the first. It's the first Tolstoy story that I read. I can see the similarities with someone like Dostoevsky, given that they're both huge Russian authors and it's a similar time period. This story, as well as The Undefeated, uh, is those two stories have transmitted the feeling of the character very well to me. This one was definitely the most, more than The Gambler, more than 1984. The reflections that Ivan Illich has overheated. Camera overheated, so I went and took a break from yapping too much, and I ate a banana. So okay, as I was saying, um, the story that marked me the most, and in the following sense, this book, the feelings of Ivan Illich, his reflections on death and his imminent death. I mean, it's no spoiler. It's the title of the book. It's no spoiler that he dies at the end of it, right? But it's how Tolstoy takes you, and how Tolstoy takes you through his the thought process of Ivan Illich, and his uh, him attempting to come to terms, or attempting to come to terms with his death, his imminent death. It's very well, very well put towards, and the way that it's written, at least for me, it really transmitted those feelings to the point that it left me with an aftertaste after reading the story, uh, that stuck with me for a couple days, which is it's something that at least marks me as a reader, and that's something that I value as a reader, is something that adds to my reading experience when that happens. Uh, then you're done reading, but you're not done engaging with the topics of the book. This was one of those books for me, and I would definitely recommend it. I still have to read. It's the only book I've read by Tolstoy. I have yet to read his other stories and novels. Um, but this was a really nice, short and sweet introduction to his literature. My first Lovecraft book, racism and slurs aside, which I knew what I was getting into. I'm not going to act surprised. He has a reputation, and I knew what I was getting into. Let's just leave it at that, right? But this was a really nice introduction to his horror stories. I read the Dunwich Horror in a PDF format. It was really nice. It was really nice. Surprisingly, it was a light read. I thought he would have a more convoluted language and prose. I was expecting something closer to like Bram Stoker, uh, but this felt more modern than that, and that made the reading experience very swift. I actually finished it in a week and a half. Surprisingly, I was reading it during my lunch breaks, um, and I was able to crush it. I am not usually a horror reader. I tend to prefer watching uh, horror stories as a as ARG. That's a new format that I really enjoy. but mostly movies. So this was a really nice change for me, and a nice introduction to his stories. I also read. I'm in the process of finishing. I'm probably 15 pages from finishing. The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. Uh, I decided to read this book because I have not read a novel by Hemingway since I was probably 14, and when I read The Old Man and the Sea, and I really don't have any recollection of the story at all. Uh, During my trip this year to Key West, I had the chance to visit Hemingway's mansion, and they also have a bookstore there. So I became, I came into contact with some of his books there at that bookstore. This being one of them, which I mentioned earlier. I also have a special edition Ernest Hemingway House special edition of The Green Hills of Africa, which is his memoir when he went hunting uh, to East Africa during the 40s, the 30s, the 40s, I believe, um, which is also something that he had a section dedicated to in his house, that I was able to visit in person. That was a really nice experience. It retells the story of Jake, which it's somewhat akin to him. It's my understanding. It's somewhat inspired in his life and his experience living in Paris in the 1920s, going down to Spain, to Pamplona for the bullfighting. Becoming acquainted with the bullfighting scene in Spain and back in the day, um, during his youth. And this book really captures what his life was like during that stage in life. I was surprised by the amount of drinking that people used to do back then. That was something that's stuck with me. How often and how much people would drink alcohol. Um, but other than that, it's a very nice travel. I would consider it a travel, a road trip story. It's a road trip story to a certain extent. Um, so I am planning on actually following that book with I have it somewhere here with On the Road by Jack Kerouac, uh, which it's on my to read list this coming year, um, because if it's left me with a taste for more travel memoirs, travel stories. It was nice. It was nice. Um, it felt a little slower in the midsection, in my opinion. In the early to midsection, it felt a little slower during the fishing section in the northern section of Spain. But as it happened to me with the Undefeated, I really enjoyed the second to last second half of the book, where it's more focused on the fiesta in Pamplona and his experience throughout the multiple days of the festival of San Fermin that took place in Pamplona, and his retelling of it and how he depicts the city and the people in the city, and it transmits a lot that it kind of really resonates with me and my love for exploration and traveling, and just really trying to absorb as much as the world as possible. So I would really recommend this as a travel um, novel. Surprisingly enough, I was not going into it expecting it to be a travel novel. I thought it would be uh, more of a love story, which to a certain extent it is, but that's kind of it's pushed to the side. It's more of a aspect of the narrative of the book. Uh, but what really shines for me in The Sun Also Rises is how it depicts the how everything feels very transitory, um, but very very alive at the same time. Transitory because it's been recounted from the perspective of Jake, of the protagonist, but very alive in how Hemingway describes everything that has to do with the fiesta, how he describes the city, and how he describes the characters just traversing the city, going from bar to bar, going from a fiesta to the bullfighting ring, back to the hotel, and it's very very engaging, and it definitely makes me want to go on a road trip. Uh, so yeah, that's most of the stories I've read that I wanted to highlight this year. I've read a couple other stories, manga actually, um, but I don't have them with me. I actually was borrowing them from the my local library. But oh, matter of fact, and I don't have it, but something that I would like to highlight that I did read this year was The Wager. That was a really good uh, travel story. I guess it would be considered a historical travel story by David Gran. Definitely recommend. I will probably be making um, a video recommending travel stories slash travel memoirs such as The Wager or um, Lost City of Sea, then books about the Endurance expeditions. Those are books that I really like, so I'm planning on making a video on those as well once I've built my collection, and I could showcase them as well for people who are interested as well. Right, so yep, that's really about it. I just wanted to dump and document the books I've read this year so far, and I hope that I'll be able to, outdo myself in 2026. But yeah, I hope to see you guys or whoever sees this, and then whatever next video.